Okay, it looks like the waiting room activity is slowing down, so I think we can go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. My name is Eli Cole, and I support the Department on Strategic Planning Implementation. And I am here with a couple of colleagues. I wonder, Ola, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Ola Friday. I'm also at EEC. I'm currently the Associate Commissioner for Workforce Development.
And Joy, would you like to introduce yourself too?
Sure, thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Joy Cohen, and I am the Director of Policy Development here at EEC. Thanks for joining us today.
And Shreya?
Hi, my name is Shreya. I've been working with Eli doing data analysis on the surveys and live engagements that you all have been participating in.
And then I know I see a lot of EEC faces. I wonder in the chat if you could just introduce yourself and your title so everyone knows that you're here. That would be great. And maybe give a little wave. So we are really happy you're here today. We have a lot to sort of talk about and hear from you. For those of you who have not been a part of the live engagement sessions before, the format is that we'll spend about 20 minutes of sharing information and then spend most of the time today hearing from you to shape the work that we are engaging in the educator domain. And so we have been doing live engagement like this every week since February or late January rather. And have really benefited so much from all 100 voices coming in and sort of helping us prioritize and consider the sort of unintended consequences, the sorts of principles that we should apply to the work. And so we are really enjoying this sort of way of engagement with the field so that you're here at the very beginning of all the initiatives we're undertaking in the strategic plan, helping make sure that they are oriented towards you and to the families and programs of the Commonwealth. So that is kind of the context for what we're doing here today. And I will just ask Shreya to go ahead and start screen sharing and we'll get started. Perfect, thank you. So the link that you see on the previous page is to our strategic plan portal, and that is the best place to go to find out more about all of the work, to participate in surveys, and to register for additional live engagement sessions. So we have a couple more coming up in about 2 weeks, focused on families and children and the best ways to communicate with them, the best ways to understand what it means to be on track to third grade success for children, etc. So our strategic plan goals circle around 4 key pillars, as we call them. And as you can see, the educator goal is a discrete focus across the whole system. And our goal for this area is that educators are able to be professionally prepared, that they're well supported, adequately compensated, and culturally and linguistically representative of the population that you're serving. To fulfill this goal, we recognize that we need to be able to build systems around educators and support educators in a way that is sometimes distinct from the program that they work in. And so we know that across the field, there is a lot of movement between programs or even between program types. And we want to be sure that the work of educators is able to follow them rather than having to start from scratch each time they start a new role. So when we think about what that means, we need to look at the background record checks and that when there's a suitability determination that's able to follow an educator, making sure that the kinds of education and training that an educator has participated in, that can attach to them and follow them from role to role, as well as any associated credentials, recognizing the experience, the years of experience and the types of responsibilities in the role, and making sure all of that is able to sort of wrap around the educator in a way that isn't necessarily attached to the program they're working at any given time. In order to be able to do that, however, we need a system. We need a system to track and validate increasing competencies and expertise, to be able to store all of the educator records in one place, and make sure that future employers are able to see the value of education and training as well as experience as part of the whole picture that an educator carries with them. In the past, as you all likely know, educator qualifications, the types of roles that they could undertake, and the rules that govern the workforce were usually embedded within the licensing regulations. And increasingly, we're moving to a future where the requirements for the workforce are separate and distinct, and have kind of their own place within a more cohesive system to support educators. That way, we're really able to capture the value of educator experience and expertise in a way that separates those achievements from the program requirements that are captured in licensing regulations. So with that in mind, we'll just lay out a little bit of a roadmap for how we're thinking about this. There are a couple of key initiatives and strategies underway. Those of you who follow the EEC board meetings will know that we approved changes to the background record check regulations several months ago. But we know that there is a lot more to address. And so we are also looking at the policies, the protocols, the technology system, and thinking very comprehensively about how we can build a background record check system or fix things in the current system to be more responsive, more streamlined, more clear, and in some cases to clear backlogs or to sort of move more quickly in some of those areas. Ultimately, I think we hope we will have a more fluid system for background record checks that is really integrated into all of the other interactions that educators need to have with EEC. We know that background record checks are just the beginning and the foundation for safety. We also need a system to ensure that that suitability determination can follow the educator. And then even better, a place where training and education records, reflections of experience can be accessed as educators move through programs. And so that's why we have been developing a professional registry. And right now that registry is in design. We have questions in our surveys right now, actually asking some opinions about what the professional registry should look like and how it should be used. And so ultimately this registry is going to be a place where we can really store all of that information, and educators are able to access what they need at any time throughout their career. With all of these systems in place, we start to have the capability to actually build an educator credential. And so right now we are very much in the phase of trying to understand what that might look like. How do we think about it in a way that that can transfer from place to place, from geography to geography? How do we build something that's stackable, that kind of grows on itself? How do we think about verification or validating levels of a credential to show educators core expertise, experience, help them position for increasing responsibilities, achieve their career goals, et cetera? So registry and credentialing, when they're paired together, can help ensure that educators don't have to start from scratch every time they move jobs or locations. The last thing I'll say is that all these pieces need to fit inside a comprehensive approach to educator regulations and supports. So regulations, policies, technology, the professional registry, and then a career pathway all come together in a cohesive approach to supporting educators as they move through positions and roles. So this is a snapshot. We always want to start with understanding exactly who we're talking about. So starting with a really clear understanding of educators in the Commonwealth right now. And so this is a snapshot of what we currently know across the workforce. This kind of left column describes the entire workforce. And then the right column starts to call out distinct things we know about different program types, the workforce and different program types. And so overall, we know that there is much higher representation from BIPOC populations across the workforce, and that this leans heavily as well to those who identify as female. It includes many more minority and female-owned businesses in terms of the percentage than the Commonwealth at large. And there are over 24 languages spoken, with English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Mandarin is the most common, but many more beyond that as well. We also know that the workforce represents a real blend of those with competencies built through experience, as well as those with competencies built through education and training. So around half the workforce has a high school diploma, the other half has more, whether it is a CDA or coursework or a degree of some kind beyond high school. Okay, so additional details related to center-based settings, which is what we're here to talk about today. What we know is that the directors typically have over 15 years of teaching experience prior to becoming a director. Over 45% have an associate's degree and 26% have a bachelor's degree. And then for educators or teachers, we know the average amount of experience is about 3 to 5 years, with a little over 30% having a bachelor's degree or higher. So that's a snapshot of what we know so far. We're going to be asking you a lot of questions to help us round out this knowledge base. And then the other starting point we have is some of the information that was already shared with us in surveys in December and January. We had almost 400 respondents to our survey asking about educators, and this has really informed our thinking to date so far. And so respondents really said that the most important role of a credentialing framework is to support career advancement and provide a clear professional pathway, which is very much guiding the work of credentialing. We also heard that in order to build competencies, survey participants were most interested in a combination of fieldwork experience and then credit-bearing coursework, that those two things seem to fit together the best in terms of building that expertise represented through competencies. And then 82% of participants agreed that when we think about how to build credentialing levels, the idea that you move from one level to the next, that it should be actually two things working together, and that's increased experience or responsibilities on the job, and then also formal education and training. But in their responses to this question, we heard again and again how important experience is. And so we have very much taken that to heart as Ola and her team have been developing the credentialing approach, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So now I'd like to turn to two of my colleagues. Joy and Ola are going to share a little bit about how their work around educators is evolving as we speak, to use as a starting point for our questions for you. So Joy, would you like to take over?
Sure. Thank you, Eli. And hello again, everybody. So this is an interesting sort of innovative idea for EEC to think about regulations that pertain to the educator and not the program. As you all know, our licensing system is designed to license programs and more specifically license the space that's used for our programs. And so we are looking to shift the standards and accountability over, as we think about educator regs, to one that says that you as the educator are accountable for your practice and your behavior and your ongoing development. And we do that through a lens of recognizing that educating children and youth is very complex work, and that it requires specialized skills, and it requires ongoing professional development and elevated qualifications. And also recognizing that the programs in which children are cared for by qualified educators are likely to be higher quality programs and programs that produce better outcomes for children. So really sort of taking an opportunity to think about what could educator regulations mean for educators across the Commonwealth, and how can we better support professional goals and professional guidelines to better articulate career ladders and support ongoing development for educators. So really excited to hear from you all about what this could and should look like, and how we can start to really operationalize and think about putting this down as a system. And now I'll switch over to Ola.
Sure. Thanks, Joy. So as Joy mentioned, one of the features of the educator regulations that we're considering is including credentials. And I know many of you are already familiar with the teacher qualification certificates at EEC. And really, this is an opportunity for us to reimagine and revamp that system so that it really applies to all educators that work in EEC's licensed programs. And so we're also looking to incorporate some other key features in the new reimagining of a credentialing framework in Massachusetts that moves beyond the current teacher qualification system. And so one of the key features, as Eli mentioned, is this idea of transferability, so that the credential really belongs to the educator, the individual, and that person can move with it from setting to setting, from program to program, program type to program type. So it's no longer really based on where you're doing work, but what work you're doing, the kinds of work you're doing, and the competencies and skills and behaviors and knowledge that you have gained as a part of that work process. So we really want to recognize that as a core feature moving forward. The other core feature we're really thinking about is this idea of stackability, so that any training or requirement, anything that makes up your credential, that defines it, can build on each other, so that you know that whatever you're doing towards that credential attainment would count towards a next higher level. There's nothing that doesn't count, that would be redundant and kind of a waste of your time, right? So you would really see how everything builds on each other, and including the building of competencies. And so we really are looking as well to respect growing competencies in this work. And we have a lot of questions for you later today about what that could look like for us. But we really are trying to be intentional about focusing on the knowledge, skills, behaviors, attitudes of the practitioner in the work, and making sure that that shows up in how we're defining the credential moving forward. And so we're excited to talk with you today about how we can do that in Massachusetts.
Okay, so now we would like to hear from you, and there are a couple of ways to do that. So what we recommend is if you are at a computer and you're able to actually work through a web page, there is a website. I'm just putting the link in the chat, but if you go to pollev, pollev.com, then use the \aim and arrow, that will take you right to the questions that we'll be asking today. And so please go ahead and link in that way if you're able to. If you are not able to access a computer with a web browser right now, you can also use your cell phone, and there are two options to do that. So there's a QR code right up here on the screen, and you can hold the camera part of your phone up to it to get started. You can also use texting to participate. And so what you would do in this case is create a new text to number 22333, and then use the code AIM and arrow, all one word, to get started and get connected. And in that case, you will be able to continue to text that number to select your option or to provide your thoughts as we go through each question. So the way that this will work is that we'll actually have all of the responses that you give will be up here on the website or the Zoom, and we'll be able to read them in real time to hear from you and receive your recommendations. So I'll give everyone a moment to just get connected. We'll take another, like a minute break to get connected. Okay, it looks like we're doing well as people are getting connected and responding to the first question. I'll wait for us to get a little closer to the total number of participants on the Zoom, but we're getting very close. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Please do continue to get connected and respond to the first question as you do. And in the meantime, I'm going to share the screen so we can see how this is going to work. And so what you see here is the question that you're hopefully responding to right now. And then I'm going to show responses so we can see exactly who's in the room, the Zoom room today. And so the question does ask you to check all that apply. And so many of you may have multiple responses on these questions, but we are asking, are you involved in a group and school age program, a family childcare program, an out of school time program? And then a little bit more specifically, whether your role is an administrator or director within a group and school age program, an educator or teacher in a group and school age program. We also are asking if any of the folks in the room today work with a family childcare system or a CCR&R, are a program support provider, for example, professional development coaches, consultants, etc. Parents, which may actually apply to many of you in multiple roles as well. Working at EEC, we do have staff members here today, advocates, union representatives, or other. And if other is something that is something on the list that's not represented, then please do add in the chat what you mean by other, because we would love to know who's here today. If you are logging in and it asks you for a username, you can make one up. It could be your favorite animal, favorite movie, the street you grew up on. So please don't feel like you need to put your own name in. You can just add a username that you feel like using. And this is for those who are accessing on the internet. Okay, it looks like we have slowed down, so I'll move to the next question. And that is, what is unique about the workforce? In this case, we're talking about group and school age, although we know there is a lot of overlap with out of school time. And so please respond from those perspectives around what is unique for group and school age programs for those who work in the out of school space, out of school time space. And this is part of EEC's work in the strategic plan and moving forward to really customize its work, whether it's the regulations, educator credentialing, our approach to quality, to really customize that approach by program type rather than sort of putting everybody lumped together in one. Out of school time teachers often hold 2 or more jobs. Yes, very part-time workforce, often having multiple jobs to make up a salary. Instituting remote learning, so running a lot of the remote learning supports, serving homeless families and their children, and needing to really be grounded in trauma-informed care, the diversity and backgrounds of the staff working in programs. Teachers are not always career professionals, so maybe you're teaching for a little bit as a step in a career that may go in many different directions. College students, having college students on staff, the education of the certified teachers, that it's much harder to staff and turnover is higher. So needing people on half days, snow days, curriculum and vacation days, that it's an inconsistent schedule and that makes it hard to find staff. Administrative credentials are looking for business experience, but there's no free business related courses for those who need them. Having degreed teachers, out of school time staff often have more than one job, hearing that again, serving lower poverty level families, teachers who only take one child growth and development class, school age young staff who use the program as a stepping stone for full-time work, combined with older staff who are great nurturers, but not necessarily interested in additional educational goals. So having a real blend across a program of ages and of goals and thinking about what those credentials might look like. a school year-based program, and so most staff have a bachelor's but still have to work second jobs. Staff of many different levels of education, that those working in OST are very flexible. Nature-based educators that need teacher credentials and the nature and environmental experience. So thinking about some of those custom program types and needing multiple types of experience. Parents have high expectations. Again, with OST, split days and college-age students. The idea that school age seems like an afterthought, which we are definitely trying to not have that feeling anymore. 90% hold masters. They share concerns about pay inconsistencies and they're leaving. They're going away from early education. Many are simultaneously going to school, and so that impacts scheduling, absolutely. Those with a bachelor's often leave the field because public schools will pay more. Many are just starting out their career and need a lot of assistance, a lot of turnover. The risk and the stress is too much for minimum wage. Need additional administrative coursework or admin coursework, differing backgrounds and skill levels, work study students, vacation, we're staffed without extra staff, needing to differentiate kindergarten through 6th grade. Teachers get degrees and move to public schools. The idea that center staff spend long days working with the children in their program. Often children are at the center more than they're at home. Again, low salaries. Direct care staff is young and from the community served. They're very passionate about the work. I love that. Privately owned childcare lack help with funding. College-age workforce. Staff need behavioral management courses. Child growth and development doesn't cover this piece for childcare, and that frustrates new teachers. The regulations currently demand a lot of the educators who are in the center-based programs, additional financial resources. The regulations and the professional development opportunities don't consider grades 2nd and 3rd grade and up, and so being a little bit more custom for that group. The pivot to remote learning highlighted how forgotten this group was. We want to attract high-level educators, but the pay, again, does not compensate for going and getting higher education. Needing grants for technology, funding for those who are primarily private pay or all private pay. The resources are still limited. Great. This is so helpful. Let's look at the next question. I wonder, Ola, would you like to frame this one?
Sure. So here we're asking, what is the most important role a credentialing framework can play in the early education and care system? And here you can select all that you think apply. So we're trying to get a sense of how can the system really support and promote educators. So for example, can it support the educators to advance in their career? So really spelling out a trajectory. Can it help with recruitment? So bringing in new folks into the professional pathway. Would a credentialing framework help programs to understand the qualifications of the job candidates, so the folks that you're hiring, making it really clear to understand what skills, knowledge, trainings that they have before you hire them? Might it help programs invest in coaching and training for their workforce? And so thinking about how you could better direct funds and resources towards supporting your educators' training and professional development. And might the credentialing framework ensure that professional development programs support core competencies? So the different training agencies and different places where folks go for PD, they would be better aligned with some of the competencies that you all think are important for for educators to have as employees. So it looks like ensuring professional development programs support core competencies in the work is a front runner. Closely followed by, it's still moving, let's see, helping programs invest in coaching. So this idea of, I think, professional development is really coming out strongly in the responses, as well as you all seeing that there's value in recruiting new folks into the field and articulating a progression and showing that this is a true profession that you can enter and you can progress through. These are great. So I think we're slowing down, but it sounds like PD and professional progression are really the standouts here.
Great. Okay, let's look at the next question. And I wonder, Ola, would you like to frame this one up too?
Sure. So for this one, we're asking you about the role of EEC. What should the state be doing when you think about credentials in the field? So for example, funding supports around training and professional development, verifying, so checking that educators and professionals have the required requirements, the required credentials, and that they're up to date, for example. So what should the role of the state be as you think about supporting credentials moving forward? So we have funding support. That's always a big one. Funding again. Articulating a very clear professional pathway. So the state could really help with that. EEC certification for school age educators. So including all educators into the system, the credentialing system. Funding and verifying requirements, funding and training, so professional development, creating a seamless process for hiring teachers at all levels, so supporting the onboarding and hiring process, funding again, clear guidance on advancing credentialing, ensuring that programs have the required funding again, setting the guidelines for educators to progress. So really painting a picture of how you move from one level to the next, helping to professionalize the field with recognizable credentials, funding again for attaining credentialing milestones. So you increase pay as you go up the credentialing system, making it user-friendly. So user-friendly systems would be very helpful. Funding, lots of funding. We're hearing that loud and clear. Again, funding and access to support professional development, free training through the Strong Start system, making sure all records are clear and current in programs. Again, this idea of funding and verifying and providing educational opportunities for educators, funding of professional development opportunities and wage increases as well. There's a change, we're changing the class requirement from child growth and development to something that better gets teachers ready for actual teaching. So setting some minimum requirements, the state can play a role there. Flexible ways to achieve credentials, so including some flexibility in the requirements would be helpful. The state could also bridge the gap between standards within school systems and early childhood programs. It's a great one. Placing the value in the individual and not just the program. So this relates to Joy's point about educator regulations. This is great. Looking at ECE scholarship and making some changes there to better support educators. Funding for IT support. So again, IT systems, making them user-friendly and easy to access and flexible. School age directives obtain one. So I think rethinking the school age population and how they fit into a credential system, creating consistent transferable credentials to grow the pool of qualified staff. That's beautifully stated. Thank you. I might borrow that. Quicker turnaround on receiving EEC. I'm not sure what that was. It's going a little fast. Faster IT systems to handle processing. Merging elementary and ECE courses so educators so they don't have to retake the same courses. That's a great idea. So really this alignment of systems between early childhood and K-12. Funding again to help centers pay their staff what they're worth, absolutely. And these are a lot of great ideas. This one's a little long. I think this one is speaking to the current requirements, and so the state can certainly revisit the requirements aligned to credentialing. Funding for coaches and mentors, so not just funding for educators, but also for support staff as well. Supporting all programs with funding, of course, to retain qualified staff. Supporting master's degrees for those who want them. Re-examining the definition of kindergartner. There is a lot of overlap, of course, in early childhood, and kindergarten is right in the middle. Directors should be qualified for all groupings once becoming director certified, infant, toddler, and school age. So really rethinking how we're defining any role requirements and creating some more flexibility there. Thank you.
Okay.
Coaching. All right, that was a lot. Thank you.
Ola, do you want to keep going?
All right.
Or you do need a break?
Yeah, this is great. I'm on a roll, Eli. Okay, so the next question for you, if you had to recommend a combination of ways to build competencies, so again, the skills, behaviors, knowledge, which two would you recommend as the most essential combination of factors to measure whether an individual has gained the next level of competency? And so here we're asking you to select your top two, because as we think about these requirements moving forward, it's really helpful to know which ones you think are most critical to include. So immediately I can see that work experience is a front runner work experience in the current role, as well as work experience in previous roles. So there's a lot of emphasis here on recognizing work experience. And this is something we've been hearing a lot from the field across the different engagements. But also credit-bearing coursework or degree attainment, that's also coming out really strongly with you all. That's now second, actually, after work experience in the field. So this is great. This is very, very enlightening. And then non-credit bearing coursework, so a little less than 10% of you feeling that training and other professional development coursework should also be counted.
Great. Looks like we're starting to slow down.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go to the next question. So what did we miss? What other ways are there of building competencies that we should consider? Or if you want to help us get more specific on any of the areas that Ola just walked through, what does that experience look like, or what kind of coursework, et cetera? So help us dig a little bit deeper on this question. Any ways of building competencies that we didn't go through? Okay, good. Emphasizing the importance of work experience again. And it's okay if you don't have additions. Mentoring, coaching relationships, active membership in a professional learning committee or community, sorry, as an important way to build those competencies. Great. Out of school time, educators should have non-credit bearing coursework and training, whereas early learning should include credit bearing or CEU coursework. Behavior management classes. Could there be a test like the DESE teacher credential test? It's a great question. Allowing administrators to submit, missed it. Administrators know their staff best. So relying on administrators to really build that competency and to verify it. Experience outside the work should be highlighted, like an extensive background in another field who's making a career transition can provide valuable resources, perspective, and perhaps more interesting education for the students. For example, coming over from the arts realm or another, a STEM field, et cetera, might be interesting. The core of the work we do is all about relationships. Montessori teaching credentials are fully accepted for early childhood licensure and should be listed. Work experience should hold a higher standard than coursework. Coursework should hold higher focus. Work and life experiences outside the field would have been my third grade. So if we allowed 3, you would have added the work and life experiences and then +1 for behavior management. The work that administrators do to supervise and observe and reflect on classes and how they're going. Early childhood programs should have relevant coursework, NAEYC credit, et cetera. The certificates from the QRIS, competency testing, Strong Start, other leadership roles like running sports and dance and Sunday school classes, really, really interesting. A test, again, talking about a test, experience in a different field, personality, administrator observations, licensor observations when visiting a program, some combo of those. School age varies greatly. There shouldn't be across the board pressure to meet competencies, but more on the ability related to the school age group. A rubric for directors to follow when they're engaging in observations, so interesting. Family childcare experience, absolutely moving from one program type to another. Alternative pathways should be considered, especially for people who work with children outside of licensed care. Great. Thank you for all these really, really interesting thinking and additions. I wonder, Joy, would you like to frame up this one?
Sure. Thank you, Eli. So for this question, we're asking what aspects of an educator's work experience should contribute to qualifications or be seen as increasing their expertise. So considering the duration of the work experience, the type of role that the individual worked in, the responsibilities that they had, what are the components, the characteristics and the aspects of work experience that we should be considering? Someone said paras who are working in a public school, looking at duration along with observations that were done. I like that. So not only the duration, but also observation time that was done during the work experience, the responsibilities and the length of time. If someone had leadership roles, so coaching or scout leaders, looking at how successful the individual was in implementation. Work with the age group in question, particularly important with OST. I like that. The length of time in the field, thinking about specifically the ages of the children that were worked with or the degree, length of time, the ages of the children that the individual had experience with, coaching and mentoring others, looking at feedback from an administrator, working in programs that are, if they worked in programs that were accredited or high level in QRS or other quality metrics, if they had leadership roles, so camp experience or administrative work. And then this is interesting, I like this, participation in action research projects. So counting work experience that included maybe a component where there was some research. That's great. Years of experience and leadership role, professional development gained annually, and the length of time with specific age groups. If there was competency-based evaluation, experience working with children with special needs or who maybe English isn't their first language, if the individual has the ability and the skills to document through observation, so assessment, the quality of work should weigh more than just the time. Excellent. All educational backgrounds are important. The years of experience in other states too, not just Massachusetts. If they worked in an accredited program and taking leadership role in the accreditation process, the abilities and responsibilities. Someone said change in capacity. So if they're able to maybe, I'm taking a guess, maybe if they can move between sizes of programs, the training obtained, the relationships that the individual built with children and the staff that they work with. We haven't heard that before. I really like that. So the type of relationships that they were able to nurture and maintain in the program. These are wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Look at the next question. What should count towards professional development requirements? Joy, do you want to just frame the current state versus what we want to know here?
Sure. So we are most familiar with seeing CEUs and training hours. That's typically what our sort of currency is. So we're wondering what else should count? What other currencies should we look at? In addition to college credit, PDPs and other things, what else should we look at to count as professional development? Are there other experiences that we should count, not just the CEUs and the training hours? Are there other things that we should consider here when we're talking about professional development?
And this is specifically to meet requirements each year around ongoing professional learning and development, right, Joy?
Yes, thank you, yes. So someone said, looking specifically at psychology courses, someone said mentoring experience, that's absolutely. Volunteer hours, so not just paid employment, but volunteering. Participation in cohort or support groups, excellent. Having director certified roles, be able to teach, so looking at capacity that way. In-house training, completion of structured observations with documentation in other classrooms. Interesting. Director observations and recommendations, involvement in a PLC, hands-on experiences and peer teaching. Training taught by a presenter that is director certified. Directors should be able to do this. Considering journaling or reflective matrix, so really valuing educators that are taking the time to be reflective and counting that. participation in Montessori professional development, self-study. This is exactly what we're looking for to learn from you. Look to counting a portfolio work, specialized project within the work, measured by outcomes. Someone likes the current setup, related training, and coursework to what's needed for the program. So looking specifically at professional development opportunities that are informed by what's needed in the program, what the children need, what the program needs. An ECE related book club. That's great. I would join that. I like that. Involvement in community organizations and events, being part of a formal board that services children and families. Mentoring an intern, so valuing that time that someone spends to mentor another educator and intern. Easier access to professional development, years of service with mentorship from co-teachers that can validate the experience. Running a recreation program at another entity. Someone else loved the idea of the ECE book. I think we're on to something. Advocacy work, so counting work that we're spending to advocate and maybe engaging in meetings like this, PDPs, state-funded classes for professional development, children's response and rapport, and observation at another program. These are fantastic. This is exactly what we were hoping we would hear from you, these ideas. So thank you.
Great. I wonder, Ola, would you like to frame this one up?
Sure. So here we're trying to get a sense of what professional associations you all are already connected to. So some of these might be familiar to you. The National Association for the Education of Young Children, Head Start, YMCAs, the National Association for Family Child Care, the National After School Alliance, the Council for Professional Recognition, which supports the CDA, Credential, Family Child Care Association, SEIU Union, and Massachusetts After School Partnership. So which of these do you rely on for professional guidance, or know that other educators rely on for professional guidance and support?
If yours is not listed here, perhaps, Ola, we could have them add in the chat.
Oh yeah, great catch, Eli, thank you. There's no other option here. So please put in the chat anything that we're missing that we should know about. I'm sure this is not the full list, so please do that. But right now it looks like NAEYC is the front runner. I'm sure many of you are connected to the Massachusetts chapter, so the MAAEYC as well. And then we also have a lot of Massachusetts After School Partnership being represented as well. Followed by Head Start. They certainly provide a lot of technical assistance and training to Head Start programs. And the National After School Alliance as well is another one, 11%. In the chat, we have a plug for the local CFCE. Thank you, Jen. Great to hear that folks are accessing our CFCEs as well. Montessori, of course, American Montessori Society, another place for professional support. CCRNRs as well in the chat. And we also see community colleges. Thank you, of course, institutions of higher education as a place for professional support. Brazelton Touch Points, Children in Nature Network, also in the chat. We've got Boston Area Reggio Inspired Network, so another child care model being represented. Montessori Schools of Massachusetts, Strong Start PDCs. Happy to hear that folks are accessing the state-funded network of training and TA. JRI as well, Child Care Success Academy, and another plug for PDCs. Thanks, everyone. It's a great list, very helpful.
Great. So I think now we want to hear from you. If EEC were to take that advice around verifying levels of a credential, what kinds of submissions do you think would really help kind of make that case of competency development? And I think we're especially thinking about that on the job development, the experience factor. How are we going to sort of verify levels of experience and capabilities. And so the options here really run the gamut, but I should say that if there's something not represented here, we would love, in the next question, we will ask for additions. So, so hold on to those for the next question. But we are focused here, are asking around supervisor submissions. So it could be an attestation, it could be a checklist. We saw this actual suggestion a couple of minutes ago, but the idea that they're observable behaviors and there's kind of a form that supervisors would complete to submit, as well as attestation from a consultant. So it could be a PDC, it could be a mental and behavioral health consultant, et cetera. It could be a coach that's hired. Testimonials from families, sample lesson plans. It could be photographs of early education schedules or artifacts, photographs of the environment, the classroom setting, responses to essay questions, videos of educator and child interactions, and then results from tools focused on adult-child interactions like class or overall program quality, like the ECHRS or the SACRS tool. And it looks like the supervisor submissions reinforce what many of you had shared earlier, which is that supervisors really understand the educators the best. And so we are hearing loud and clear in this this response that those submissions from supervisors are really kind of in the lead of all of the responses here, but definite representation across all of these potential submissions for verification. So as I said before, our next question is to say, what else? Are there other ways that competencies could be verified in addition to the ones that we just walked through? So help us sort of fill out the rest of the picture. Educator portfolios being able to really assemble kind of a holistic picture of the educator work, children's responses, so being able to meet certain outcomes with the population that you work with, portfolios, child outcomes. I assume also the relationships with children are captured there. Feedback from licensors, so thinking about EEC's own staff members as a way of providing some of this content for verification. Peer evaluations, a portfolio with listed required documents. So sort of a standardized approach to that portfolio, but also allowing for some options around choices and flexibility. So the educators really able to represent themselves and their best work. Putting the educator in charge of their professional growth and development is one thing that a portfolio could accomplish. Great. I know this one is slow. I hope that means that we covered a lot of the main things in the last question. But okay, this is interesting, having class-trained observers that are focused on adult-child relationships and interactions or youth and school-age context. 360-degree feedback from supervisors, coworkers, and families, a self-evaluation. A peer review or letters of reference from past supervisors. Great. Okay, thank you. So this is our last question in the last 4 minutes, and that is there anything else that you would like to share that we haven't asked? So this is kind of the catch-all for anything that might be on your mind that we haven't asked about, but you want to make sure we're thinking about on the topic of educator supports, credentialing, professional registry, et cetera, regulations. Keeping in mind that experience doesn't always transfer into competence. I love that and would love to hear more specifics on that. Are there other things that do really translate when we look at experience that tell us that competency has grown? Behavioral management training, it should be a requirement. Connection or shift towards a competency-based degree programs versus traditional degrees, PDPs, one platform. So making sure the technology is really supportive and there's kind of a single portal. Educators should be able to attend, and typically they're working when these are being held. That is great advice. We will make sure that we have some additional sessions when those working hours might be done. A playbook type set of regs specifically focused on teachers and classrooms, great. A standardized checklist or rubric for program administrators to use for evaluation. Oh, good. So reinforcing that that's a good idea. School age very different, so making sure that we keep that in mind. A Montessori validation project in Massachusetts is being launched, and what does that have impact that has on teacher professional development credits? That we require very little to be certified and don't lower the expectations further. Help professionalizing the field. Calling it childcare and daycare minimizes the efforts to just as if babysitting or watching children, when we actually do significantly more. If EEC could help with the language to move us to early childhood education and out of school time programs, that's great advice. Trainings, professional learning communities for administrators to guide and training and retraining educators. Adding behavior management and racial justice. Colleges are beginning to add coursework that encompasses challenging behavior, but there's a lack of classroom management skill development. Playbook idea got another second on that one. Colleges are dropping ACE degrees. So see quality classes and degrees rather than just a minor that can help educators grow professionally. More certifications, behavior management +1 for behavior management, racial justice work, more really good coaches and mentor master teachers. SEL and community engagement, merging elementary and ECE courses. And I'm going to stop sharing, but leave the question open. So keep the comments coming, but we are at the end of our hour and I want to make sure you're able to get on with the rest of your day. So I want to say thank you so much for attending. We will have a conversation on this topic again in probably the April-May timeframe. So this is the early conversation. We'll come back in the mid to late spring to say, here's where the status of this work, and ask you to provide more specific comments on the things that we've got on paper at that point. And then this is all part of an ongoing conversation through June, July, as we develop all of the initiatives underneath the strategic plan that we've targeted for this first year. So thank you again for attending. I'll leave the question open, so please keep adding your thoughts, but have a wonderful day. Feel free to sign off. It was good to see you all. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I see a recommendation for a 1 o'clock start to catch more of the early learning educators during nap time. That's great advice. Thank you for asking that, Ola, in the chat. Okay, I'll go ahead and close the meeting and hope everybody has a great day. Take care.
Bye.